Welcome to Learning Outcome 4, where we look at the laws that govern how we use computer systems. We'll identify the main pieces of UK legislation and then explore how they affect ordinary users and organisations alike. Let's start with why legislation matters at all. Computers store personal data, connect to networks, and can be misused, so their use is governed by law. That legislation exists to protect people's privacy, keep data secure, and make certain harmful acts criminal offences. Everyone who uses a computer, from a single individual to a huge organisation, has both legal duties and legal rights. In this outcome, we'll identify the main laws, then explain how they actually impact the people using the systems. Let's meet the main players. The Data Protection Act 2018 governs how personal data is handled, and it works alongside the UK GDPR, which sets out the rights and rules for processing that data. The Computer Misuse Act 1990 makes hacking and related acts crimes. The data laws are enforced by the Information Commissioner's Office, while the Computer Misuse Act is a matter for the police and the courts. Other laws, like copyright, apply to computer use too, but those first three are the ones the specification focuses on. Let's define the three core laws properly. The Data Protection Act 2018 is the UK law that controls how organisations collect, store, and use personal data, and it sits right alongside the UK GDPR. The UK GDPR is the General Data Protection Regulation as kept in UK law, setting out principles and rights for handling personal data. And the Computer Misuse Act 1990 makes unauthorised access to computer systems, in other words, hacking, and related acts into criminal offences. Together, they cover both protecting data and punishing misuse. Let's look more closely at the Data Protection Act 2018. It's the UK's main data protection law, working hand in hand with the UK GDPR, and it applies to any organisation that processes personal data, meaning any information about an identifiable living person. It gives individuals, known as data subjects, rights over their data, and it places clear duties on the organisations, the data controllers, that hold it. The Information Commissioner's Office regulates all this and has the power to investigate and to issue fines. The UK GDPR sets out a series of principles that organisations must follow when handling your personal data. Data has to be processed lawfully, fairly and transparently, collected for a specific purpose, and not quietly reused for something else. It must be adequate, relevant, and limited to what's actually needed. A principle called data minimization. And it must be accurate, kept no longer than necessary, and kept secure. On top of that, it gives you rights, such as the right to see the data held about you and the right to have it erased. Let's turn to the Computer Misuse Act 1990, which was brought in specifically to tackle hacking and computer crime. It creates three main offences: unauthorised access to computer material, which is basic hacking; unauthorised access with intent to commit a further offence; and unauthorised acts that impair how a computer works, such as spreading malware. In practice, it covers guessing someone's password, getting into accounts you shouldn't, and releasing viruses. It draws a firm line. Access has to be authorised, full stop. Beyond those three core laws, a few others apply to computer use as well. The Copyright, Designs and Patents Act 1988 protects software, music, images, and text from illegal copying. Health and safety rules cover the safe use of display screen equipment at work, and the Privacy and Electronic Communications regulations deal with cookies and marketing emails. Being aware of these extra laws is what keeps users and organizations comfortably on the right side of the rules. Let's gather the laws into one clear summary. The Data Protection Act 2018 controls the use of personal data, and the UK GDPR sets the principles and rights that go with it, both enforced by the Information Commissioner's Office. The Computer Misuse Act 1990 criminalizes hacking and misuse, and it's enforced by the police and courts. And the Copyright Act 1988 protects creative and software works, upheld through the courts. Knowing which regulator sits behind each law is genuinely useful in your assignment. Let's think about what all this means for you as an individual user. The legislation gives you real rights. You can ask to see the data an organization holds about you and have any mistakes corrected, and your personal data has to be kept secure, which lowers your risk of identity theft. At the same time, it sets limits on your own behavior. So getting into someone else's account is a criminal offense, not just bad manners. In short, the law both protects you and lays down rules you have to follow. Organizations carry the heaviest duties under data protection law. They must keep personal data secure, collect only what they genuinely need, and clearly explain how it's used. If a serious data breach happens, they usually have to report it to the Information Commissioner's Office within 72 hours, and larger organizations may need to appoint a data protection officer and keep records of their processing. Meeting all this costs time and money, but it's also what builds and keeps customer trust, so it's an investment as much as an obligation. Let's balance user rights against user responsibilities. On the right side, you can access the personal data held about you, have inaccurate data corrected, have data erased in certain cases, and expect your data to be kept secure. On the responsibilities side, you should only access systems you're authorized to use. Keep your passwords private and strong, avoid copying software or media illegally, and handle other people's personal data lawfully. Rights and responsibilities are really two sides of the same coin. Let's make this real with a scenario. A college laptop holding unencrypted student records is stolen from a car. Personal data has now been lost, which counts as a breach under both the Data Protection Act and the UK GDPR. The college has to assess the risk and report the breach to the Information Commissioner's Office if students could be harmed, and it should warn the affected students so they can protect themselves. The regulator can investigate and, in serious cases, issue a hefty fine. The simple lesson? Encrypting that laptop would have protected the data and softened the whole impact. Here's a Computer Misuse Act example. An employee logs into a colleague's account using a guest password to read some private files, even though they don't change anything. That's unauthorized access under the Computer Misuse Act 1990, and it's a criminal offense, not merely a breach of workplace rules. If they intended to commit fraud with what they found, the offense becomes more serious still, and the employer may well dismiss them for gross misconduct. On top of that, the law is crystal clear. Access must always be authorized. Let's look at the Information Commissioner's Office, or ICO, the UK's independent data protection regulator. It publishes guidance to help organizations comply with the law, and it investigates both complaints and data breaches when they arise. Where there are serious failures, it can issue enforcement notices and substantial fines. And it works both ways, because if you believe your own data has been mishandled, you can make a complaint to the ICO yourself. It's the referee that keeps data protection meaningful. Ignoring the law carries very real consequences for users and organizations alike. There are fines, with the Information Commissioner's Office able to hand out large financial penalties for data protection failures. There's the risk of a criminal record, since offences under the Computer Misuse Act can lead to prosecution and even imprisonment. And there's reputational damage, because customers quickly lose trust after a breach. When you weigh it all up, compliance is simply cheaper and safer than dealing with the fallout of breaking the law. Let's finish the analysis with a genuine balancing act. The law pushes organizations to protect data, but very strong controls can make a system awkward to use. On one hand, tight security, encryption, strong passwords, and limited access protects privacy and satisfies the law. On the other, if a system is too much of a struggle, people invent risky workarounds that undermine the whole thing. The best judgment lands in the middle. Protect data and rights while keeping the system practical, using proportionate measures, guided by ICO and NCSC advice. This part of the outcome is really asking you to weigh protection against practicality and reach a sensible conclusion. Let's draw Learning Outcome 4 together. Computer use is governed by law to protect privacy, keep data secure, and make misuse a crime. The Data Protection Act 2018 and the UK GDPR control how personal data is handled, while the Computer Misuse Act 1990 criminalizes hacking. And other laws like the Copyright, Designs and Patents Act 1988 apply too. The legislation gives users rights, such as access, correction, and security, and responsibilities, like authorized access only and lawful data handling. And remember that non-compliance can bring fines, prosecution, and reputational damage, so security always has to be balanced against usability. That concludes Learning Outcome 4, and you should now understand the main laws around computer use and how they affect both individuals and organizations. To explore further, the reading list points you to respected texts on information technology law, together with journals covering data protection and cybercrime. There are also authoritative websites, including the Information Commissioner's Office, the official legislation site, and the National Cybersecurity Center, and case studies on real enforcement action and the famous case that led to the Computer Misuse Act. Do make good use of the ebooks and journals on Moodle, as they'll deepen these ideas and support your assignment.